And there's several people in here who want to be artists. And what can you say about that world and that life and what you think people need to know?
It's an awesome gig. A lot of my best friends are artists and like successful ones, and it's a really, really hard thing. Like, especially now with technology, fans feel like you owe them a lot more than they used to. Used to, like, being an artist, there was a lot of anonymity that went along with that, and that was sort of the cool thing. Now it's like complete exposure, and it's interesting. It's not all that much about the music anymore. Like, you spend 6 months making a record, but then you spend 2 years making sure you're tweeting the right things. And that's totally cool, but that is a big part of it now. And it's hard too, because it's like there's this catch-22. You need to have a radio hit or a single at radio to get on tours, but then you need to be on tour to convince a label to put your single out to radio. And there's this weird dance that so many of my friends are stuck in this purgatory right now of getting a record deal, which reminds me of another good point. Like, a lot of people work really hard to get a record deal and then stop working because they got the record deal and they're ready for the label to, like, all right, maybe famous now, let's do it. And it's like a label's only going to work as hard as you'll work. And a really good example of like where music is now is like Chase Rice. Like, a lot of people hate his music, but he's an indie artist with a platinum single that's at number 7 right now. Like, he's not signed to that label. It's just a distro thing. Or at least it is for that single. And, like, that's incredible. It's because he just went out and worked his butt off for, like, years. And, I mean, that's a really impressive thing. I don't particularly love that song, but, like, which don't put that on there. I wrote his next single.
You did?
Yeah.
That's awesome. What did he do to build that fan base over those years?
He figured out who he was. Like, he figured out who he was in dealing with the fans, because there's a million different ways to be. And he was also really consistent. Like, consistent in a lot of ways. Consistent in the sense that he was the same person in his interaction with people. Like, he's been that character. Because it is kind of like coming up with a character. Like, who you are on stage versus who you are on the bus is not the same. But then also being consistent with, like, updates. Like, people are really fickle, and, like, they will forget you really fast. And in my experience with being an artist, that was the one thing I had the hardest time with, was, like, how quickly people would forget. Like, we would do all this work, build this great momentum, and then, like, if you slack for a second, it's crazy how fast it can go away. So just, like, really paying attention to that stuff and working hard at that. And the internet's amazing, you know? I mean, you can do so much through the internet.
Right. So, like, you know, in terms of fan engagement and all those kind of things.
Yeah, fan engagement is a good way to put it. Like, interaction.